Sorry? Oh, we have gentlemen here. Yes, I did hear you mentioned and greeted Mr. Allen. That's it? Yes, my memory not so bad, despite the gray hairs. Colleagues, friends, neighbors, it's good to be here. I'm looking to see there have been some improvement. In my time, there was no air condition, so things have improved tremendously. I used to have Sunday school somewhere up there with Mrs. Allen, but yeah, those were the good days. All right, I was asked to give you guys a talk today, and Mommy reminded me that in doing the talk, I must be G-rated, so I can't talk about my favorite topic just now. I'm going to be talking about chronic non-communicable diseases, all right? And so, if we can start. Oh, Mommy? Mommy? Where Mommy is? Oh, that lady at the front there. Yes. We're just getting started up. You see, as men, as we get older, we kind of take long to start sometimes. Ah, there we go. There we go. Next slide. All right, so what am I going to be doing? What do I hope to achieve in our discussions today? And I'm hoping not to take too long on the podium, but really to provide some opportunities for us to have a conversation and to interact. What I'm going to be describing is what we call a model, or a model of care that we like to tell us doctors and healthcare providers how we need to interact with the community. I'm going to define for you some of the chronic non-communicable things that we're going to be speaking about. Really just to tell you about how common they are, what are some of the consequences, and as physicians, how we think they're caused. I'm going to talk about arthritis because every time I'm giving these kind of talk in this particular age group, there are some questions there. Broadly speaking, some interventions, and last, some recommendations. Next slide. So on the chart there, oops, we disappeared. That happens sometime. All right, I really don't need it. It's really mainly for you folks. What I wanted to demonstrate is that when we think about how we administer care, care represents what we call a shared agreement between the persons who are seeking care and the persons who are supposed to be delivering care. And there are several components to this particular care. You have to think about, certainly when we think about Jamaica, what is the health system that we're going to be using? What's the model of the health system? We know that election is near. And you know how you know that election is near? One of the things that the both sides start to talk about is health, right? So one will tell you that, cancer is bad, or one will tell you that you wait forever, or the hospitals need X, or this hospital's overrun. Anytime there's election over the last 20 years, health becomes a topic, whether it should be free, not free, and so on. So the health system, how it is modeled, how we provide the services is an important component. But somewhere along the line, if my slide is up, on the left-hand side, you will see a thing that says that really and truly one of the things that helps individuals do well with the care that they receive is if we have informed and activated patients. So what do we mean by that? We mean that individuals have some knowledge about their general health, have some knowledge about things that they're supposed to be doing, and are motivated to want to do it. Not only do we need informed, activated patients, we also need them to engage in a partnership or an agreement with their healthcare providers to achieve certain goals. So whatever those goals are for you, and the goals will vary from individual to individual, whatever those goals are for you, those are the things that we all agree that as a group, or as a part of that partnership, we will work towards. My next slide, please. So my next slide is really going to speak about what are chronic diseases. And so from our side, how we define chronic diseases are really these are diseases that are non-communicable. You don't get them by touching or sneezing or coughing. You primarily get these kinds of diseases through what we call lifestyle. And what makes them peculiar is that we really can't cure you, all right? So let's say you have blood pressure, we can't cure you. But we can provide you with some treatment that will prolong your life and make sure that you have a better quality of life. The other thing about chronic diseases is that they have many different causes. There's no single particular thing that we can touch or identify and say, this is why it causes your problem in your particular cases. And so when we speak about chronic diseases, you'll hear healthcare providers talk about a term called a risk factor. So what do we mean by a risk factor? Well, essentially a risk factor is a cause, is an attribute, is a characteristic, which if you possess that characteristics or are exposed to that characteristic, it increases your chances, or sometimes it can actually decreases your chances of getting a particular condition. So that's really what we mean by a risk factor. Is there any attributes or any characteristic or any exposure that an individual modulates or changes their ability to get a particular disease. The next slide, please. So what are some of the examples of what we call chronic non-communicable diseases? The most common one that we will talk about, and many of you will hear about it, is the so-called pressure. The medical term is, of course, hypertension. Then we have diabetes. Most of us will call that sugar. Then we have the fluffy things, all right? Most Jamaican men kind of like the fluffy things. Admiral Bailey had a song about it, about his big belly. But the truth be told is that big belly is not very healthy. So we have obesity. Then we have asthma. And of course, we have things like arthritis. So these are not communicable diseases per se. But as I said, they can be chronic. Once you have them, they stay a very long time. All right? So let's focus on perhaps the top three, which is the hypertension, the diabetes, and the obesity. Next slide. So on the next slide, you will see a diagram which gives you a rough indication of roughly how common blood pressure problems are in our population or society. So there is what we call a particular study called the Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Study. That study is carried out by one of our units at the University of the West Indies, which is the Caribbean Institute for Health Research. And we do it roughly every 5 years. We're going to be doing one probably later this year. And what we do is that we go to all the parishes. We use some fancy technique to choose the area in the parish that we're going to go. And we take samples. We ask individuals certain questions. We give them a little bit of a health checkup. And we take blood and measure certain components of the blood. Looking in this last one, we looked at your blood count. We looked at your sugar numbers. We looked at your cholesterol numbers and so on. And then when we get that bit of information, we then do some mathematical gymnastics so that we can predict what happens to the general population on a whole. So using this sampling technology or sampling technique, we can see that when we went out in the field back in 2017, because that's the latest report that we have, we found that if we were to interview, measure 10 people in the country, every 10 persons we measured, we found that only 3 of them would have a normal blood pressure based on all the criteria that are out there. All right? So it basically means that the vast majority of us I have some form of pressure issues, all right? That means that if I was to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 7 out of the 10 that I've counted will have pressure. And as we get older and get gray hair, it becomes even more common. Next slide. Similarly, when we look at diabetes, which is what you would classically call sugar, we find that roughly about 12% of individuals will fulfill the criteria of having full-blown diabetes. Now, I know some of you talk about this thing about the touch. We're not sure where the touch comes from. But unless, of course, you have a sweet mouth like me, then you'll get my touch. But outside of that, the diabetes, when you have full-blown diabetes, roughly about 12% or 1 in 10 of you will have that. Next slide. Then we look at obesity and overweight. So how do we define that? We use an entity called your body mass index, all right? So what is this entity? This entity says that we take your body weight, whatever that number is, we get your height, and then we put it into a formula, and that formula will give us a number. The formula says that your body weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared give us this particular number. The important thing is this: if this number is more than 25, you'd be considered to be overweight. If this number is over 30, then you'd be considered to be obese, all right? In our particular slide that I'm showing you here, I'm using a cutoff of over 25. And if we look at that cutoff of over 25, what it says is roughly half of the Jamaican population is fluffy, all right? Next slide. So another feature that we find that when we look at any of these chronic diseases, whether we think about hypertension, whether we think about diabetes, whether we think about obesity, there's lots of differences between men and women. And broadly speaking, women comes off worse off than men, all right? And older folks comes off worse off than younger folks, all right? So as you get older, and as if you're a woman, because, well, no, we can change your sex, but if you're a woman from birth coming up, you're likely to have more problems than if you are a man and stayed a man all your life. So next slide. So what are some of the issues that we face if it is that, unfortunately, we end up with some of these issues? Well, one of the things is we die earlier. So there's increased mortality, all right? Well, if you're a Christian, Reverend Glenn would tell me that's not too bad, right? Well, he's looking. Well, there's increased mortality. And of course, there's also increased morbidity, meaning that you can become sick, right? And what are the things that you tend to be sick with? You tend to be sick with heart problems. You tend to be sick with kidney problems. You tend to be sick with strokes. Fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes you may even become blind, because diabetes especially has a habit of damaging the blood vessels in the eye, and one of the complications of having those blood vessels being damaged is that you become blind. The other thing is that, of course, if it is that you become sick, oftentimes requiring hospitalization, the thing, or have one of these complications like kidney failure, it costs money, and somebody has to pay. So whether you pay out of your pocket, whether your insurance company pays, or the government pays, it costs money. If you have, that's a rough rule of the thumb, let's say you have kidney failure. If you have kidney failure, you generally need dialysis at least 3 times a week. Average cost of dialysis is about $12,000, all right? So that's $36,000 a day per week. And then if you add on top of that the typical medication package that we give you, which is another $20,000, you're looking at somewhere in the regions of about $120,000, $150,000 a month if you were to go on the private sector for just looking after your kidneys, all right? So the long and short of it is that if you don't have it, then clearly, some people tell me it's actually cheaper to die, but we'll figure that out. But it's expensive, so, and somebody has to pay for it. All right, next slide. The other thing that we found when we went out into the field is that despite the fact that it is so common, many persons, even when they knew that they had these problems, whether it be diabetes, whether it be hypertension, only about 1 in 10, or 12% of individuals, were adequately being treated. So the vast majority of individuals, over 80% of individuals who have these problems are not getting proper treatment or are not compliant enough with their treatment that we achieve good control. So generally speaking, what we then have is that we have a scenario where we have these things that are very, very common. We have the things that most people know. There's still quite a few people who don't know. But even when they know and are diagnosed, very few of them are actually taking their medications or have achieved what we call good control. So let's look at some of the causes now. Next. Some of the causes that we like to talk about, and there are many, is the genes. So many of these diseases will tend to run in families. So we will know that our parents had sugar, so there's a good possibility that we may end up having sugar as well. Some of our parents may have blood pressure issues. There's a good possibility that we ourselves may have blood pressure. It's not just the genes that you inherited, because the gene is the thing that carries those characteristics from one generation to the other generations. But it's also how those genes are what we call expressed. And there are many things that may cause what we call an expression of a gene. So what do we mean by expression? So essentially, when you get the characteristics from your parents, it's not a given that it must show. Let's say you get a blue eye characteristics from your parents. It's not a given that you will end up with blue eyes, right? It's really whether or not the environment is there that will support the expression of this gene. And one of the things that can affect whether genes shows up really is what we call what you eat. So nutrition plays a very important role in modulating or making genes become active. The other thing that we know is physical activity. Many of us are really just not active enough because we have motor cars, we have elevators, we might have some pains in the joints, and so we're not as ambulant and as active as we really should be. And so one of the things that we have found was that when we actually measure and ask people, just how active are you, we find that Jamaica generally have very low physical activity. The other thing that individuals may do, of course, is as I said, their dietary component are generally poor. And one of the things that I've noticed over the last few years, for example, is that those of us who end up having to buy lunch in what we call a box food, the individuals, they say, they're serving it, you will hear individuals saying, okay, they want some more gravy, and then put some gravy in there, and they want another more gravy, and they want more gravy, and they want oxtail gravy, and then curry goat gravy, and all kind of something, all right? And so at the end of the day, when you look at the servings, you find that the rice is swimming, I can move from one part to the other swimming because there's so much gravy. The other thing now that I found very interesting is that individuals will ask you, do you want pasta or vegetables? Now, the truth be told, pasta is another starch. So you end up getting lots and lots of starch, right? And there's no comparison. It's like apples and oranges. Vegetables are vegetables, and you actually not having enough of it. Pasta is another starch. So those of us who happen to choose lots of pasta or have the pasta, you're really just consuming a lot of starch. So the diet is poor. The other thing is, of course, some of us pleading guilty here. Some of us like to purge a system, so we have a little bit of rum. But the truth be told is that what we are now finding is that alcohol is not so good for you. And as a matter of fact, so okay, can I have one drink or one glass? And again, if it is that we're looking at, it depends on the outcome that you're looking at. If you're looking at cancers, we can't find a safe levels for alcohol. If you're looking at cardiovascular outcome, then yes, perhaps a one drink here and there won't do you any harm. Importantly, what we have also found is that when a mom is pregnant, how she eats, how she takes care of herself, can have lasting impact on that baby. So we find, for example, that during pregnancy, if the mom doesn't eat right, doesn't take care of herself properly, has blood pressure problems during the pregnancy, it's actually going to affect that baby and make that baby, when he grows or she grows up into a big person, more likely to get high blood pressure and diabetes and asthma. So it's important as well that we think about how it is that we care for and the services that we provide for moms when they're pregnant. Another important thing that we need to think about is what we call the existing social circumstances. One of the things people may not realize, but with all of the traffic that we now currently have in the country, traffic causes stress. Stress makes your blood pressure and your blood sugar worse. And we have measured it. We have done studies in which we have taken what we call cortisol, which is one of your stress hormones. Some people are stuck in traffic, and we find that it is up through the roof. So it's not surprising that people are so miserable and stuff whenever you cut past them or you bad drive them and so on. But that's not very good for you. The other thing that's not very good for us as a community is the level of crime. That induces stress, that prevents us from doing physical activity. And so neighborhoods that have high levels of crime, sometimes you will see that they will also have high levels of some of these non-communicable diseases. And all of these, how we build our communities, all of these high-rises that we have, becoming a concrete jungle, not enough space to be able to move around, are things that limits us in terms of physical activity and actually contribute to us having some of these chronic diseases. Last but not least, the other thing that I want to just mention as some of the causes is the bugs or bacteria that you actually have in your gut. More and more we're realizing that you really have some bugs in your gut. Now, when I was growing up, some people used to insist that I had to get a washout before going to school. All right? And they used to give us this little thing to drink, you see? The Saturday before school started. All right? I remember those things very well. All right? And you ended up having to go bathroom countless times. All right? Because they ended up having to, what they call, wash you out. Yeah? Yeah. But what we find nowadays is that those bugs in your belly is actually good for you, you know. They're very, very good for you. When they're working well, you will have good poo, you will have good farts, right? So that means that they're working well. Now, the problem now is your diet actually can change the makeup and the mixture of these bugs. And what we're finding is that individuals who have what we call poor diets, high-fat diets, not enough complex carbohydrates and starch, they will end up with a bad set of bugs, and those bugs will actually make them more prone to becoming diabetic and so on. So it's becoming important findings, and it will also contribute to them being fat. Next slide. So I'm just going to mention a little bit about the pains, as I'm at that age now where we start having that. So osteoarthritis, what it is. There are different forms of arthritis that you can think about. You have arthritis that is due to a lot of what we call mechanical wear and tear. Just because you've lived long enough or the joint has been damaged, you can end up with this form of arthritis. So this form of arthritis is what we call osteoarthritis, all right? You may have heard other forms of arthritis like rheumatoid arthritis and so on. Those are special. Those are what we call autoimmune diseases. The one I'm speaking about today is the one that happens either because you've had some injury to the joint, like a fracture or so on, or just because you've used the joint often enough. So those of us who are athletes in a younger time, the joint that we stressed out a lot, they're going to talk to us when we get older. Typically, you will have pain and stiffness in these joints. The pain and stiffness, especially the stiffness part, tends to be the worst in the mornings when you're waking up. As the day progresses and you warm it up a little bit, the stiffness tends to go a little bit. And there's often some swelling that's associated with it. So this form of arthritis is really due to the fact that you have damaged the padding between the joints. You see that in the little gray areas there, every joint. Those of us who like to eat chicken and eat chicken leg, there's a nice little part over it. My grandma used to call it the grizzle. That's really the nice little cartilage, and it's all in all of our knees and so on. And the issue is that once you damage that, right, you end up with bone rubbing against bone, and that's eventually what causes a lot of the pain and inflammation that you see. Next slide. The main cause of arthritis is really aging. If you're fluffy and overweight, that will tend to cause that as well. If you had injury to the joint, and as I said, overuse, repetitive injuries. There's also if you're born not aligned properly, for whatever reason, one leg shorter than the other, or things like that, you also can have arthritis in the joints because you tend to be unbalanced in terms of your movement. And of course, individuals who come from a family where there's lots of osteoarthritis will find that they get osteoarthritis a lot as well. Women tend to get it a much earlier than men, mainly because, as you know, once they pause men, I don't know why they want to pause us, but they've paused men. So once they've entered menopause, they will end up not having the protective effect of the hormones, which keeps the bone healthy. And so they will end up with what we call weak bones, osteoporosis, and that will help contribute to them getting the arthritic problems. So what can we do with all of these issues? Next slide. So we can think about some interventions, and I've put some classical interventions that we often will engage in. So counseling is one of those things where we will speak to you about some lifestyle-related stuff, how you're supposed to eat, how you're supposed to exercise, don't drink, don't smoke. We will try to get you excited about doing these things. One of the options that's available to us is, of course, referrals to the respective specialists, whether it be a dietitian, whether it be some social work to help out with the circumstances, physiotherapists to help you with the movement. There are different specialists that we can use, orthopedic surgeons, if it is that you have an arthritis. And last but not least, we can treat you with medications or drugs. I'm going to speak a little bit about the food. Next slide. Right, so the Ministry of Health has some guidelines, which you'll see up there, which really seeks to advise us and tell us how it is that we should be looking, or what kinds of food that we should be consuming. To break it down in a nutshell, what we have found is that Jamaicans on a whole don't eat enough vegetables. Jamaicans on a whole, despite the abundance of fruits that are in play, don't eat enough fruits. And the truth be told, if we move towards eating more vegetables, eating more fruits, eating less meat, the only exception I'd make to that is my favorite meat. Of course. So I like Lent, so I'll tell you a secret. When Lent comes, some people don't eat pork, and so my fridge gets full. So outside of that, if it is that we do these things, and the other thing that we find that Jamaicans like to do a lot of, which is also very bad for them, is salt. And I will Go next, salt. Next slide. This fancy looking chart is just a chart that demonstrates that most Jamaicans, when we measure them, so this is a study that we did about 3 or 4 years back, where we actually went and got some Jamaicans off the road and we asked them to pee-pee in a bottle for us so that we could measure the amount of salt that they had in their pee-pee. And what we found, because the amount that's in there is a reflection of how much you actually consume, and what we found, the fact that them chart is so high, really tells us that Jamaicans in general love them salt, right? But guess what? The salt will give you pressure. And so the fact of the matter is that we really need to start thinking about how it is that we can reduce the amount of salt that we actually consume. Next slide. And so the ministry has come up with these nice, pretty diagrams. Those of you who have grandkids, or those of you who are in high school and just finished primary school, you will hear that we're teaching the kids about glow food and go foods and all of those stuff, and we're trying to give them these nice, pretty color charts that will help them identify the foods. Some of you may get some counseling by the little ones when they come in and tell you, oh, that's not good or that's not right, because we're trying to teach them from that young age what are some of the good foods and what are some of the bad foods. One of the challenges I know is that generally speaking, there's not enough resources for individuals to engage with. And so one of the initiatives that we really want to do, or the ministry is also doing, and we're going to be doing it with them later on, is really just try to provide additional resources for the community as a whole to be able to engage with, so that you can know what is good, what you should be eating, and how you should be eating it and how you should be preparing it. Next slide. This is a calorie counter that was done by Dr. Thompson. Unfortunately, she passed last year, but it was actually an attempt to really just tell you, using Jamaican foods, what are the amounts of calories that are in them, so that it will help guide you in terms of your choices. So what do we mean by the amount of calories? So essentially, whenever you consume a food, it provides you with what we call energy. The amount of energy that it provides you with is really what contributes to your, what we call your metabolism, to allow you to live and grow. Each of us has a set amount that we should consume. So just like if you have a car and you go to the gas station and the guys put some gas in there, you can fill the tank, in which case the car can go far, or you can do half tank or whatever. So similar, the food provides you with the calories, which allows the body to move around and so on. The challenge we have is that if the amount of calories that we put into the body is more than the amount of calories that we burn up doing our usual activities and walking around, what will happen is that the body, in its wisdom, is going to store these calories. And where does it store it? It stores it in tissues that we call fat. And where are you going to find the fat? Well, it depends on whether you're male or female. In men, they tend to start storing it first in that belly of theirs, all right? So oftentimes, when they become very prosperous, that Admiral Bailey said that he has this big belly, well, that's really just saying that he's having extra calories than he actually needs, and so his belly stores it there. Where does it go in the woman? Well, they have more spaces for it to go. So it may be in their bottom, maybe in their belly, maybe up top. They have more places they can put it. But in men, most times we tend to put it in our tummies. Next slide. Just to say, those of you who are internet savvy, you can go to the Ministry of Health. They have resources on their website which will help us be able to navigate the process. Next slide. And these are just some broad things that we want to encourage individuals as they age. So one of the things that we say is that all babies, when they're born, the best way you can protect them from getting sugar and pressure as they get older is to give them breast milk. And they really should be having breast milk for at least 6 months of their life. Cow's milk really not very good for them. And what will tend to happen is that you're setting them up later on in life to end up getting blood pressure and sugar problem. The other thing that I want to say here is in the older folks, those of us who are beyond or in our 7th and 8th decades, You could even start at your 6th decade. One of the things that you have to worry about is something called sarcopenia. You may hear it being advertised on TV or cable. And sarcopenia basically meant that even though you may be looking sturdy, having some tissues, what happens is that the underlying muscle component of your body becomes weak. So if we don't do a lot of exercise, what will happen is that the muscle itself will get smaller and wither away, while what is replaced, what you're seeing, is really just fat. And if the muscles get weak, then it also means that you can't tolerate illnesses well, so your ability to cope diminishes. And so it's important as we get older, we may not be able to run 100 meters like Shelley or Asafo, but what we want you to be able to do is to do what we call some weights training, which is really just take some simple, a bag of rice or something, and just really just move them up and down to just get some resistance, we'll call resistance training, so as to try and keep those muscles firm, all right? So that's one of the things that we would recommend. Next slide. All right. So one of the things I often preach about is point number 1, that we really should have a policy that encourages breastfeeding. And so with that policy, one of the components of that policy, of course, is paternity leave, right? Because us men need to be able to be there with you to make sure that the baby getting his breast milk. You don't think so? Yeah, I think so too. Right. So we already have the maternity leave, which is 8 to 12 weeks, but we also think as men that we probably need twice the time, so to be at home. One of the things now, we know elections is near because I hear them arguing about the school feeding program, but clearly we really need to be able to do something about the school feeding program. Currently, them give them a bulla and some milk. The question is whether or not we're setting the people them up for bad outcomes. And more importantly, we really need to ensure that we put some measures in place so that tin stuff is really one of the main sources for you to get salt, because the preservative of almost all of the tin stuff will have salt in them. And so we need to really embark on a strategy of what we call salt reduction. So either it is we're going to formulate the bully beef with having less salt. I know Grace has one of their low salt components, but it's strategies such as those we'd have to be thinking about. Next slide. Now, we have to become more active as a group or as a population. Exercise has many benefits. It reduces the risk of you dying, it reduces the risk of you developing blood pressure or diabetes, and even if you have those, it actually helps the medications work more effectively. It also helps control your mood, makes you less depressed, so it has lots and lots of benefits for you. Next slide. And so what we're saying is that there are some basic goals that we should be aiming towards. Most time we're saying you should be exercising for at least a half an hour or so, at least 3 times a week, and exercise at a pace or at a rate that at least cause your heart to move a little bit. So if at the end of the day you can complete your walk and you're still talking without being short of breath, you probably haven't exercised hard enough. You probably you just got tired rather than doing something beneficial. The kind of exercise that you do is really dependent on your own personal capacity. If you can swim, swimming is the best form of exercise for us as we age, for the simple reason that it's less stressful on the joints. Otherwise, walking is just as good, or if you can do the stationary cycling, that would be very beneficial. But the important thing is to choose something that you can do consistently and something that you actually enjoy, because the frequency is very, very important. As I said, we should be aiming for at least 3 times a week, ideally more than that if you can. Next slide. So for those of us who are unfortunate enough to have the arthritis component, what can we do to help you along the way? Well, the more important thing, apart from the weight loss to get your weight down, is that we can try and provide you with some pain relief. And there's different ways to do pain relief. We can give you pain relief through medications. We can give you pain relief through applying some warm compress to the joint. when I was growing up, we used to have these nice bags to fill them with warm water, and you could put them on your back and your thing. I'm not even sure if they still exist, but the same principle is really what is important. Sometimes we may do what we call an injection in the joint, where we actually do a steroidal injection. So we get these drugs and we stick it in the joint, and that's beneficial for some. Physiotherapy, where we send you off to the physiotherapist who will then give you some exercise. Sometimes they'll put some electrical stuff on the nerve. Those sort of things sometimes can be useful. And more importantly, is really if the joint is really giving you a problem and it's your knee joint or your hip joint, then we can replace it with metal. We just take out the bones there, just chop off the top part and the bottom part, put some nice metal stuff, and you end up with a better than new joint, right? Nice, good mechanical joint. So we do that. Probably you just need about $1 million, $1.5 million, and we do that for you, right? So you can end up with being good as new again. My penultimate slide, next one. So what this busy slide is supposed to do, and don't worry about if you can't read it, really what happens was that some years ago, my colleague and myself, we did some studies looking at crime, generally speaking, in the different communities. We also looked at the impact of building parks. So we went and looked at the Papine Park and Emancipation Park. We measured individuals as they were going around and doing their stuff and so on, and we interviewed a few of them. And what we found was that generally having these kinds of facilities actually do promote, people do actually use them, and they use them at a level that for the most part can be beneficial. And so one of the things that we're trying to get incorporated as part of the policy is really to say that if you're going to build up all of these communities, you really must have proper facilities that allow individuals to be more active. And there are certain characteristics of the facility, how you configure the walk-in component, how you, the whole design components of it is also important. But the secondary to that is the more important fact that we really need to ensure that we do provide in our built environment, in our communities, proper places that individuals can exercise. Now, one of the challenges we know is that if you take some communities, for example, let's say you have a field, the fields get captured by the young boys, eh? They're always playing them football and kicking the stuff, and therefore how these fields are structured is just not having an empty field or put some grass or a goal post, because otherwise what it will do is disenfranchise one group, which is the female, tend to disenfranchise the females, and they're the ones who are far more affected. So we really need to look at some of the characteristics of what, for example, Emancipation Park has turned out to be, that encourages both old folks, young folks, men and women to actually use it, all right? And so that's what all of these fancy things were, some studies that we have published and have shared with the ministry for them to incorporate in their policies. Next slide, my final slide. So in conclusion, we know that there are some individual levels responsibilities that we all have. Your health is really your health. You really have to take charge of it. We recognize that there are some interventions which you are going to have to engage on. So we call those therapeutic interventions. So we're going to give you some medicines. And the expectation is that you will have to take the medicines in order for you to derive the benefit. On the diet side, the simple take-home message is that a little of everything is likely to be good for you. Many of us really don't consume enough portions of vegetables. And a simple rule of thumb is that currently what you have as rice in many of our serving really should be the vegetable portion, and what you have as vegetable portion really should be the rice. Eh? So we tend to get that the wrong way around. the other thing is starch is starch. So whether the starch is rice, or the starch is yam, or the starch is banana, it's still starch, right? So giving up rice to go yam and banana not necessarily solve your problem if you're going to still have the same amounts. So it's trying to get a balance, some from all the food groups. That is going to be very useful. We need to make physical activity an important component of our everyday life. And whether you have arthritis or not doesn't stop you from exercise. If you have severe mobility challenges, you really can't move because of pains and so on, there are exercises that we can give you that you can do in the seated position with a limited mobility. There are some public health things, considerations, so those are some conversations we're having with the ministries and so on. And some of those public health initiatives would involve what we call screening, which basically means that there are lots of people walking around who are walking sick and they don't realize it. And the important thing is to try and catch them. So when you guys have on your health fairs and so on, there are lots of times that we end up identifying individuals who really didn't know that they were sick. And so these kinds of screening activities are important. Screening is a process that we use to try and identify diseases very early before they become symptomatic. We need to encourage your members, your colleagues, your friends to actually go and at least see the doctor at least once a year. Right? There are many mechanisms. Those of us who want to come to us in the private sector, fine, you have to have a little bit of money or your insurance. But in the public health system, at least access to the health professional is still free. And so we really should make use of those opportunities to at least have a checkup at least once per year. There are other social determinants, some of which we have some control over. For example, the traffic. If we can move around when there's less traffic, the better it is for us, because just moving and sitting in the traffic really is very stressful. And your communities, if you can help create community clubs or community things that get people moving, those are important things that you can do at the community levels. So my final slide, which I say bye-bye, there it is. So that's where I am at UWI in most of the time. So that's the Faculty of Medical Sciences. It was built by the Chinese, but hopefully Trump won't put any tariff on it. All right, so question time now. Any additional questions and clarifications that individuals may or may not have? Great. None. No question. Good. All right. Yeah. Oh, they have questions? So no more shy? Oh, you want to ask? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Prof, I just need to ask, how important
it was secondary school, right? So if you didn't go to Arden, you didn't go anywhere, right?
No, I went to a good school. How important is your sleep to somebody who has a heart condition or hypertension? Is it very, very important? Or you can get a 5-hour and that should be enough?
Sure. So sleep is actually a very important technique. It's really during the period in which the body repairs itself. And so we really do encourage individuals, especially when they're younger, to try and get at least 8 hours of sleep. We know we have a lot of problems with our teeny boppers and our kids because of all of these device issues that they're addicted to. But sleep is very, very important. It helps reduces their stress level. It also, in addition to reducing the stress level, it also allows the body to repair. Now, one of the challenges you will see is that as we age, the actual amount of sleep that we actually need to accomplish the same things that we had when we were younger is actually less. So while there's ideally it's varies from individuals to individuals, but you'll find that the older folks can function on much lower numbers of sleep than a young person without causing harm to themselves. All right, so if you're an older folks and you find that you only need 6 hours of sleep, that's fine. All right, that in itself is not detrimental, but sleep is something very important that we should all aim to do. All right. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, man, it doesn't matter.
Doctor, some persons say that they have been cured of some of these lifestyle diseases because they switch to vegan diet or they have been cured miraculously. But you have stated that chronic lifestyle diseases cannot be cured. Has this been challenged?
Well, you're challenging me now. All right. So the short answer to your question is that, all right, let's say, for example, all right, so let's start this way. You're normal, you're on my left side. On my right side, you have a full-blown disease. It's not that you move from this part to this point, right? It's usually a progression where you move from being what we call relatively normal to when you've met all the criteria that we say that you have a disease, okay? Now, depending upon where and when we find you, right, we can, or you can follow the interventions that we have just said, which are an appropriate sets of diet and your physical activity. And then what that will do is shift you back towards the normal. But the truth be told, should you stop, all right? The reason why you'll be having those regular numbers is because you're continually engaging in the activity that kept you back down there. But should you stop, you're actually going to end up progressing back to your disease. So the short answer to it is that whilst you may have good numbers, so let's take some practical things. You can actually, especially if your blood pressure has not been too bad, so you have what we call stage 1 hypertension. So let's define that some more. So we say you're hypertensive if your top number is more than 140 or your bottom number is more than 90. Now, if that top number is before 140 to 150, all right, or your bottom number is between 90 to 100, many of us will tell you that you really need to engage in a process of lifestyle adjustments before we put you on medications. And for some of you, that lifestyle adjustment is all you need to get your blood pressure within the normal range. Similarly, for those of you who are what we call pre-diabetic, that is, your blood sugar numbers are not yet in the diabetic range, but they're not normal, having or engaging in a lifestyle adjustment is, for many of you, sufficient to get you back your blood sugar numbers in the normal range. The moment you stop those lifestyle adjustments is the moment you're going to go back to becoming and getting the full disease. So in that regard, if one could always say that once you're on that lifestyle adjustment, I'm cured. You can't really say that. That's really just to me semantics. But the moment you stop, you're going to get back, or you're going to go back in your disease. All right? But lifestyle intervention in itself is an intervention that we use, and for some people, it is all they need. For others, we try that, and you need some medications along with it. Yes, General. Oh, no, just behind you. Go ahead. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Mango? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 Mm-hmm. So the short answer is that one can overdo anything. Full stop. So although generally speaking, mango has certain attributes that are useful. It's rich in vitamins, especially because it's a fruit. It also has fiber, which is good for the poo, so you end up not full of it. The truth be told is that it has a sugar component in it, fructose, which will increase your blood sugar numbers. So the long and short of it is that we encourage you to have, but we encourage you not to have too many. So what is a good number? A good number is 1. Sister B? You were going to ask something? No, she's finished. Yeah, you were going to ask something? Mm-hmm.
We talked about vegetables and the importance of vegetables to the diet. But I'm a little concerned with the farming situation these days, where the farmers use a lot of insecticides, a lot of chemicals, so that we can get the nice looking vegetables that we grow after. And then there's also the GMOs. To what extent do these factors affect our intake of vegetables and the lifestyle?
So the short answer is that they do. They do. So the challenge we have is that depending upon your farming practices, because you tend to take vegetables raw, that's the best form of taking your vegetables. What will tend to happen is that you may take it with anything else that you have that is being used to farm the particular vegetables. Even when you try washing things off, you may not be perfect in doing that. So there's always a risk when it is that you consume vegetables, especially from areas that use more industrialized farming techniques. The truth be told, unless you are doing the farming yourself or unless you have an intimate relationship with the farmer, is really just a risk that you're all taking. Now, the issue about GMOs, what GMOs are is genetically modified foods. So what they will do is that they will find a plant that they've modified it for some particular reasons. Usually the modification is to make sure that this plant is resistant to pest. All right? The truth be told, the GMOs part of it is not something that we really worry about, because the truth be told is that let's just take an arbitrary example. Let's say you have a GMO potato. The potato itself, the components of the potato itself, the body sees it as the same, all right? But there have been some concerns related to the fact that GMO crops generally may interfere with other natural crops, and therefore there are certain countries and certain regulations which actually regulates the amount of what we call GMO foodstuff that you can have access to. But the truth be told, all that has happened in the GMO industry is that we, to some extent, have accelerated things that would normally happen over time. It's just that instead of waiting for what we call natural selection to occur, we speed it up in the lab and then actually end up growing it. So for example, when I was growing up back in that country place called Jacks River, our coconut crop was, a lot of it got damaged because of yellowing disease. And so in order for us to now get coconuts, we ended up having to import coconuts that were resistant to that. So in a sense, that new coconut that we're bringing in, right, we brought it in because it was resistant to the pest at the time. So in a sense, GMO philosophically is not bad, meaning that when you find a variant that is resistant to the pest, that's not in itself bad. But what is bad for me, which is even more challenging, is the specific agricultural practices, which exposes you to pesticide, exposes you to what we call microplastics, because plastics now are all over the place. I'm sure if I was to do an analysis of many of you, we'll find plastics in your blood all over the place. So those are some of the concerns that we have moving forward in the future. Yes, sure. You can go first, and then I'll just follow with you.
Okay. Oftentimes when we do our health checks,
Yes,
our yearly health checks, we would hear of the term good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. I don't know if you could touch on that for us.
Sure. So what I didn't speak to in my slide here was the whole aspect of cholesterol and cholesterol metabolism. So what or who is cholesterol? Cholesterol is a chemical which we have in our bodies. It's actually a very good chemical. Without that chemical, you will die. However, when the concentrations in blood reaches a particular level, it becomes harmful. And it becomes harmful because it acts like a sticky, gummy stuff in the blood vessels. That whole process of it acting as a sticky, gummy stuff in the blood vessel is what we call atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis, you have cholesterol mixed with platelets, mixed with all kind of stuff, and you get this nice thing. And the gummy stuff actually just blocks the blood flow. So individuals who have atherosclerosis will have blood vessels that are narrower, and depending on where those blood vessels go, if they go to your heart, you'll end up with getting heart attack. If it goes to the brain, you'll end up getting a stroke. If it goes to the kidneys, it can really cause your blood pressure to go up. And if it goes in your blood vessels to your feet, you'll end up with what we call poor circulation. So having too much of it is actually not so good for you. Now, what we find is that when we look at the different types of cholesterols in the blood, because when we take it out and we measure it in the lab, we have what we call different fractions of cholesterol. And the fraction that we call HDL cholesterol is what we find is actually pretty good for you. It keeps the blood fluid, so there's less tendency for it to clump up. The fraction that we call LDL cholesterol, we find that that fraction tends to attract a lot of other stuff onto itself and makes things very gummy and gluey and tends to block the blood vessels more. So oftentimes when you go to the lab, they will take your blood and or sometimes they will prick your finger and take a sample of it and put it on a little machine. It will give you a value, right? That value is what we call the total amount of cholesterol that you have. That total amount of cholesterol is the sum of your bad cholesterol, which is the HDL cholesterol, and your LDL cholesterol. Now, ideally, you want your LDL cholesterol to be a lower fraction of the total, okay? You want your HDL cholesterol to be a higher fraction because it's a better cholesterol to have. And so when you go to your healthcare providers, not only will they tell you what your total cholesterol is, they will often tell you what your LDL cholesterol, which is the bad version, or your HDL cholesterol is. When your cholesterol is elevated, it's important for us to look at what we call the distribution or the proportions of those. So if you have a lot of LDL cholesterol, you're likely to go in trouble fairly quickly, all right? And so a lot of times, if you have a lot of LDL cholesterol, we'll have to give you cholesterol tablets or medications to help bring that down. So that's essentially what that story is. As I said, you don't want it too high because when it gets high, it blocks up the blood vessels and you end up with your stroke and your heart attacks. All right? Now, where do you get your... You can go, man. You can go, man. All right. Where do you get your cholesterol from? Cholesterol comes from two sources. One source is what your body actually makes, because I tell you, it's such a very important molecule, your body will always make some. Your liver makes it. It's very important. The other part of it comes from your diet, all right? Now, some of us have inherited genes that allow us to make a lot of cholesterol, all right? And we know that because when we check family members, so we check you, we check your brother, we check your mother, we check your father, we find that your cholesterol numbers in that family tend to be high, all right? So we know that's a genetic thing. You just was born with the genes to make lots of cholesterol. And for those individuals, no amount of diet that they are going to do is going to affect their cholesterol levels. We just have to put them on medications. The other source of cholesterol is what you get from your diet. And typically, cholesterol is found in animal products, all right? So that basically means meat, eggs, milk, those sort of stuff. And things from animals is really where you're going to get your cholesterol from. And the product that has the highest amount of cholesterol is going to be things like shrimps and lobsters. Those are the things that have tons and tons of cholesterol. So all of those lobster lover, each time you take a bite, you're taking tons of cholesterol in. So one way that we can encourage you, remember, you have on one hand, you're making cholesterol, and then on the diet side, you're taking in cholesterol. So we can modify the diet side. There's not much you can do by yourself, except if you take cholesterol medicine about what you make. So we can advise you, and typically if it's not too high, so I'm going to give you some numbers now. So typically we use metric units in Jamaica. So the normal cholesterol number should be less than what we call 5.2. Ideally, you want it to be about 5 millimoles per liter. If when we check your cholesterol number, it's like 5.5 to 6, we would say, okay, let's put in some lifestyle adjustment first. Let's focus on your diet. Let's see if you can eat less fried food, less meaty products. If you can do some of those things. The issue with eggs are a little controversial, but the long and short is reduce the amount of oil, fried stuff over about 3 to 6 months, and then we check the cholesterol numbers again. If that is successful, then we can say, okay, let's continue that. If that's not successful to get you to goal or target, then of course we have to give you the cholesterol medications to get you to goals or targets. All right? Especially if you have other risk factors. So the other risk factors could be a female who is postmenopausal. It could be a male with high blood pressure, somebody who has what we call truncal obesity. It could be any one of those risk factors.
Do diabetes and hypertension diagnosis means a low sugar, low salt in the diet?
Why you want to kill yourself? All right. First thing. All right. So the first thing first is that you cannot live without sugar. If you try to go on a no sugar diet, you're going dead. The brain is one organ that cannot do without sugar. So for those persons whose blood sugar levels fall low, what happens to them? They go into a coma. Your brain cannot do without sugar, all right? So you must have starch in your diet, all right? The issue, as I said, is any diet that is too extreme in any one thing often is not a very good diet. You really need to have a balance. So you need to be able to identify what we call the major food groups. And the major food groups are the starchy food groups. And the starchy food groups would include things like your rice, your breadfruit, your yam, your banana, your sweet potato, your dasheen, your cocoa. Those are, and pasta, for those of you who get these white people things. Those are things that we call starchy stuff, okay? Then you have what we call fats and oils, which is a little easier for you to know because those are your cooking oil, your butter. Those are your fats and oil. Then you have what we call your meat or proteins. And so that's your meat, whatever form of meat that you want, whether it be beef, chicken, pork, any one of those things. Now, pork is one of those weird ones. Some people think pork is white meat. Pork is actually red meat. But the issue is that poultry or chicken, which is the real white one, the main difference is that generally speaking, they will tend to have less cholesterol and so on than the red meat. And so on that basis, a lot of people, and fish, they will think that those are, or we usually recommend that those are a little better than the red meats, all right? And the truth be told is that when we think about cancer as a cancer risk, red meats tend to have more cancer potential than, say, the white meats, all right? So generally speaking, that's why we encourage that. Then the other thing that you have to be thinking about is your fruits and your vegetables. Now, it doesn't matter what disease you have in life. It doesn't matter whether you're healthy or you're sick. The truth be told is that you need components from all of them in order for you to live. All right? So whether you have sugar whether you have pressure, you must have a little of all of these components in order to have what we call a balanced diet. So the issue is not whether you should have them or not have them. The issue is the amounts that you should have. All right? So in a diabetic, for example, you want to consume foods that are not going to cause your blood sugar numbers to go high very quickly. So that basically means that you want to consume foods, generally speaking, that are not sweet to the taste. Because the moment you can taste that it's sweet, it means it has simple sugar in there, which is going to absorb very quickly, and therefore will rise your blood sugar. The big fancy term for that is what we call glycemic index, but you don't have to worry about that. The easiest way is that if it's very sweet to taste, once you're eating it, then there's a good chance that it's going to rise your blood sugar, very quickly. And so you want to reduce how much of that you take at any one go, because your blood sugar numbers are going to spike, all right? But you must have starch or you will die. The brain must have it, okay? If you're hypertensive, the idea here is that you must reduce the amount of sodium or salt that you take in. And the reason for that is that sodium tends to make you keep in water, and that makes the blood pressure goes up. So how do you achieve that? Salt is present in almost every single food that you can think of. So you don't really need to add salt. Now, I know many of us are accustomed to adding salt for cooking purposes. Ideally, if you can do without it, in terms of cooking, that's better, but we know the food not going to taste good. So what we will tell you to do is to at least use a pinch of salt to do your cooking. However, thereafter, don't add any salt. Once you have finished cooking, there's no need to put salt. There's no need to put salt on the pear to eat it. There's no need to put salt on the egg before you eat it, all right? Because that's just unnecessary. The other thing that is high in salt, no matter what you do, is things that come from tin, because we usually use sodium nitrate as a preservative, all right? So it therefore means that when you're going to consume the tin stuff, you're going to need to wash it off to get rid of that salt. Now, if you're going to eat salt mackerel, you're going to wash it out? No. So you're going to end up going to get a lot of salt when you go and do your tin mackerel, right? So that's the challenge that you face. It's not that you can't, but you need to balance them. And so the counterbalance to sodium is something called potassium. So if you take more potassium, which you get from your fruits, one of the things that will help to do is to balance out the bad effects of your sodium. So what is really important ultimately is what we call your sodium-potassium ratio, all right? What we do find that in Jamaica, most of us eat a lot of salty things and don't eat a lot of fruity things. And so we end up with this bad sodium-potassium ratio. And that fancy chart that I showed you was what we got when we measured both your sodium and your potassium. We realized the potassium level is down here and the sodium level is up here. People just not balancing it right. All right? But don't kill yourself. Oh, no, you want it to the end, then you can go.
Professor, could you kindly touch on the bush tea, the alternative medicine? Because nowadays I've seen people drinking up the turmeric and the merengue, even abandoning the doctor medicine. So could you kindly touch on that?
So that's fine. Actually, one of my students, we had done some work on the merengue extract and plant. So the truth be told, disclaimer, I grew up with my great-grandaunt, we call her our grandmommy. And one of the things we competed against when I started med school was that she always insisted that her medicine was better than mine, eh? And then she used to say a thing, I'm not sure if you used to do it, but she said, Kirote. You ever hear about the Kirote? Yeah, man. All right. Now the Kirote business. Now, the truth be told is that some of these, what we call plants, actually do have ingredients in them that are beneficial. So that's the first thing we will say. Some of them do have ingredients in them that are beneficial. We shouldn't give up on our African heritage. In the old days, that's what kept some of our forefathers alive during the days of slavery. And when I visit Africa, we actually see a lot of similarities between what we currently do and what they do. So I know basically some of those practices have passed down to us through our oral rituals. However, the issue why we end up having medications, and many of these medications actually have their origin from plants. So it's not like, we got some bright idea and made it from scratch. What we actually do, which is what I did for my students and so on. So let's take moringa, what we would do. We would take the moringa leaf or thing, we'll crush it up, right? We will try and extract some stuff out of it, and then we would take these extracts and we'd either drip them into a rat, and see what the effect is, or we'll drip them into some cells and see what the effect is. And so let's say we find something good, we then go in the lab some more and find out if we can find what is that active ingredient. And then if we can find that active ingredient, and we can put it into a pill and then give the pill to some people and then does the thing, then we get a new drug. So the truth be told is that taking bush per se, in of itself is not bad, all right? Some of them really do have good beneficial effects. What's the challenge we have? The challenge we have is that not all of them, a lot of people make claims that don't have any evidence. So they will say, anytime you hear anything can cure you for everything, it means it don't have no use. So they will tell you that it's good for your nose, they tell you it's good for your head, they tell you it's good for your belly, they tell you it's good for your little man get up, all kind of stuff. Once it has so many benefits, there's a good chance that it is probably not good, all right? The second thing that you have is dosing. So when you go and you mix your tea and so on, one of the challenges you have is that you don't really know how much of what you're getting, all right? So there's a dosing issue. So we have an ingredient issue and we have a dosing issue, and we have an issue where we really don't know whether or not these things really have all of these benefits. So the truth be told, what I often tell my patients is as follows. I have a fairly open mind. We can enter into an arrangement, all right? Let's say you tell me that your turmeric is going to be better than my little tablet here. We can enter into an arrangement. Okay, so I know what your numbers are today. We have agreed on what those numbers are, all right? What we now need to agree on is that you're going to take the turmeric the way you say you want to take it, and we're going to give you some time for which you're going to do that, all right? It can be open-ended. So we may say we may agree on a month, we may agree on 2 months, we may agree on 3 months. Usually don't go above that. And I give you a chance, you do your thing. And then when you come back and your number's still not better, you then go and take my little tablet, right? And then we do the same thing for 3 months, right? Now, the important thing is, of course, you have to be honest. Yeah? You're going to take my tablets or not, right? So let's say we agree and you take my tablets, and I can show you that my numbers are better. Then I think I win, that's all. All right. So the long and short of it is that, generally speaking, many of these nutraceuticals really don't have any supporting evidence that they really work. And so that's the problem. And so as such, many of us as doctors will not recommend them per se. Some of them will have what we call adjuvant effects, meaning they can work alongside the traditional medications. Some of them have antagonistic effects and really should not be taken with our medications. But some of those discussions really need to happen at the doctor-patient end, where you have a discussion. I know sometimes you go to your doctor, him don't have no time for you because, you hold up him time to earn him money. But the truth be told is really, remember my first slide, I said that we need to have informed, activated patients. So if your physician is not able to discuss or have a discussions with you, then perhaps you should change your physician. All right? Because guess what? We're not always right. We're wrong plenty of time. No, you shut up. Hmm? Yes. Sure. Happy to say. So, the important molecule that you have to worry about is sodium. That's the important molecule. Once it has sodium in there, that's the part that is bad. All right? And whether the sodium is green, yellow, pink, blue, purple, or white, it don't really matter. It's still sodium. When it go down there, the kidney see it as sodium. All right? So the color not really important. All right? It's not elections. The color not important. Now, what happened is that we found that, especially in some countries, that there was a deficiency in iodine that led people to getting what we call goiter. So you may see this big swelling on the neck of some people. We call that a goiter. It's really a thyroid gland. And what we found was that one easy way that we could reduce the amount of goiter that is floating in the population is to add iodine to the salt. So that's how we end up with iodized salt. It's still salt, but what we have done is added another chemical in there to give you extra iodine to prevent you from getting the goiter. All right, that's all it is. But the long and short of it, it's no better than the no other salt. It still has sodium in there. All right? And when it reaches the kidney going to say, damn, it's a sodium. All right? Yes. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Who which mic first? Go on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Prof.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to touch on turmeric.
Turmeric? You got to touch it?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I recently had surgery, and I really was intaking a lot of turmeric.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was supposed to do surgery, doc checked all of my stuff that I was taking, supplements and all those things. And when he looked at it, he said, turmeric, you need to stop taking it. Stop taking it.
STOP. Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you, when I did my surgery should have been 5 hours. My surgery was 9 hours.
The important thing is that you're with us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the turmeric is a dangerous thing. So I have really stopped taking it since because it's something that you bleed.
Okay, sorry. So let me make a comment on that because I hear everybody getting all excited. All right. So the first thing first. Listen up. First thing first is that, as we all know, what might be good for me might be poison for you. All right. So we recognize that the medical term for this is that there's a lot of inter-individual variations. All right. We're all different. Some of us can manage a good round of liquor. I'm sure if I give Glenn a glass of rum, he'll gain spirits, all right? So the long and short of it is that each of us have different capacity. Now, generally speaking, as I was saying, there are a lot of claims made for different ingredients. So, for example, garlic, for example. Some people swear that garlic lowers the blood pressure. Some people will swear that black pepper does it. Some people swear that turmeric does it. The fact remains is that the point I was making is that for many of these supplements, we really don't have any what we call good proofs that they actually work. All right? Now, there are many reasons if you're going to do a surgery why we may tell you to stop specific supplements. It may affect your blood clotting, for example. It may affect your liver numbers. It may affect all manner of things. So there are many reasons why when we're going to put you to sleep, we want to make sure we can wake you back up, right? So because of that, we usually are very cautious. We prefer to be on things that we know about, that we can control. So, or we have an antidote for. Because the idea is not just putting you to sleep for sleeping's sake. We want to make sure that we can wake you up when you're done. All right? No, this lady wanted to have a... Go, Gilly. Mm-hmm.
I was just asking this question. I am a sardine lover, right?
Sardine?
Right.
Yeah, man.
And
just the one in water.
just eat the one in water. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, man. But that means you must eat it every day, though, you know? All right. It's bedtime. Right? 8:15? Yeah, man. We're good. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to hand you back over to your Prezi.
Sisters, I'm sure we are much more educated than when we came in here this evening. And we want to thank you, Professor Reid, for such an excellent presentation. I believe that most of us in this room can identify with one or two of the diseases that you spoke about. And I'm sure the talk helped us to understand how better to deal with it, whether through medicine or through exercise or through our diet. I want to now call on Sister Paulette Mignot to come and present too. Professor Reid, can we ask you to come back this side, please? Prof. Reid, can you come back this side? Sit here.
Prof, as you run along, somebody was saying, you mentioned the sardine being in water. What about olive oil?
Olive oil? Yeah, that's not too bad. So again, it really depends on what is your major challenge. So for example, if it is that you have atherosclerotic disease, which basically means you have a heart attack or a stroke or cholesterol is high, you really want to avoid things with oil.
Oil.
Right? But outside of that, there's no real disadvantage. Again, when it comes to food, a little of everything is usually okay. Is when you take too much of it because you love it, that's when you run into problems.
Yeah, and so I know I'm going to be running a lot of problem, Prof, with the mango. I had about 4 since evening. So, all right, what Professor Reid, on behalf of the Bethel Baptist Women's Federation, I use this opportunity to extend our heartfelt gratitude for your very excellent, enlightening presentation on chronic non-communicable diseases. And in particular, you mentioned the 3, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, diabetes, the sugar, and the obesity, which is the overweight. Your comprehensive overview of some of the causes, prevention strategies, and management techniques for these diseases has shed light on the importance of adopting healthy habits. Hence, we thank you for inspiring us to take control of our health and indeed make positive changes in our lives. And ladies, we have to agree, ladies and gentlemen in our midst, we really need to look at that. Having said all of that, though, it gives me great pleasure and an honor this evening to make this presentation to you. No, but I know it is something that you will like, and I hope you will enjoy it. So God's continued blessings upon you. God's continued blessings upon you and your family as you continue to do what you do. Thank you. Thank you. And I know I speak for the men that's in our midst as well. Definitely.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we are way past our bedtime. So, Sister Annette, did you want to say something before we go? Sisters, we're going to dismiss in a minute. I think Sister Annette wanted to advise us of some. And just to say that we want to thank you again for coming out this evening. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for sharing in this presentation with us, and especially the men who came in. We want to say thanks to you, and all the sisters, all the new persons in our midst this evening. We want to say a big thank you. Sister Anne?